Hey, good morning. It's Amrita Bradley, the creator of Breaking Boxes. And this morning I had the pleasure of talking to Margot Porter. So Margot Porter is a senior yoga teacher and Ayurvedic consultant. And today we're going to talk about something that's a little bit taboo. Now, when I say taboo, I don't mean something you're not allowed to talk about. I'm saying it's probably something more around the we don't talk about, we probably should. So today we're going to have a chat about perimenopause. So, Margot, how you doing?
Great. Thanks, Amrita. Thank you very much for inviting me onto your show. I'm really looking forward to our chat and really talking about opening up the narrative around menopause as perhaps a more positive journey through our life cycle rather than what's portrayed a little at the moment where it's a bit hush-hush, as you say, not quite taboo, but not something we speak about openly. And I think when we do that, we can really support ourselves and each other better in the community.
Absolutely. So, Margot, tell me a little bit about yourself first. Tell me a little bit about your yoga journey and how you wound up passionate about, well, the later stages of, women's lives.
Amrita, good question. I won't make it a really long answer. I've been practicing for about 27 years and teaching for over a decade. I've studied in a variety of styles like Hatha Yoga, Vinyasa, Yin Restorative, Yoga Nidra, etc. So I've probably got over 1,000 hours plus of study because I'm a bit of a nerd. And I also studied Ayurveda because the two are really connected and you can't do one without the other. But it seems that the yoga world is mostly based on the physical, but there's a lot more there to offer for women and the community. And it's more about the mind than about your body. So that was sort of my journey, is that it really helped me back into connecting more deeply with myself and understanding my habits and behaviors and how I could shift and change them. And that's really what brought me, I think, to my current passion. I have a lot. My current passion around menopause and helping women. And that's because my own journey brought me there. Like I was busy running a studio, and perimenopause pretty much brought me to my knees. It was quite debilitating, a real roller coaster ride for me. And I thought, why is no one really talking about this? And how can I help myself, not just through yoga, but also nutritionally through Ayurveda? But what else is out there? What else can I do?
And so this is really interesting because I'm in my fourth decade of life, probably inching closer to my fifth. And this is something that's sort of playing on my mind a little bit. So I know you caught my attention when you started doing yoga workshops for menopause and perimenopause. And my thoughts around this was, when you're 13, well, assuming that you start, menarche at about 12, 13, somewhere around there. And usually at that time, you're living at home with your parents. Usually you got your school friends around you, you're getting sex ed at school. So there's a lot around, hey, there's this big change in life that's about to happen. Let's try and get you prepped for it because it's going to be a bit of a shell shock when it happens. So I'm talking about when you get your first period. Yeah. And then you go through a really long, most women, have a really long time where they are fertile. So somewhere even from, 13 all the way up until, mid-40s, sometimes earlier, sometimes later. And but then we get to that stage where things are ending and we know they've got to end, which most of us are quite relieved that, I think, that we don't have to deal with having a monthly bleed. But in saying that, there's not a lot of information around it. So all of a sudden you're a 40, maybe around 40-something old lady who is starting to go through a few, bumps in the road and going, what is going on? So, talk to us a little bit about the symptoms of, say, start with perimenopause and then we can move on to menopause.
Yeah, sure. Look, I love that. It's kind of like puberty at the other end of your life.
It certainly is.
Except you've got work pressures, family pressures, maybe aging parents, maybe children leaving, and you're shifting in your work environment as well at that stage. So look, if I talk a little bit more about my journey, because every woman's journey will be unique, and the signs of perimenopause will show up in a whole raft of different ways, and you may not even put it down to menopause, which is what happened to me. I didn't really think it was perimenopause. I started not sleeping as well. I started putting on a little bit of weight around my tummy, which was not usual. Things like my mood swings. Suddenly I'd be quite irritable and very cranky. And I just thought I was tired, that I had too much on my plate, that I was a little bit stressed. So those are signs of early perimenopause. And the later signs of menopause or perimenopause is when you start noticing the changes in your period. And that's what most people think, or most women think it is, when I start to notice my period maybe being longer or lighter or heavier. Look, mine only was different for about 6 months, 8 months, and then it stopped. And my mum says hers just stopped. So there is no direct pathway through. We're all going to travel it our own way. And I think that's really part of my message to women, is that if you're in your late 30s and 40s, find out, educate yourself, because the symptoms or signs that you may be having, you can actually do things to support yourself and help yourself. But if you don't know that that's what's going on, you may just put it down to, I'm just, got too much on my plate.
Okay, so is this something like, if I asked my mother what her symptoms were and what age that, she started to go through this change, that would be possibly similar to what I would go through, or is it completely different for every woman?
What I've heard anecdotally, and I don't think that's how you quite say it, but that's okay.
Anecdotally is right.
Yeah, I think the age is about the age that your mum went through it, but you'll have a totally different experience because you've had a completely different life. Maybe she had 5 kids or 10 kids. You've had no children. Do you know what I mean? So, and we're 2 individuals where our father and our mother joined together. So we will have our own experience. So my mother just said not much happened, Margot. So that was her experience, and I'm really happy for her. But a lot happened for me, and I'm really happy for that as well. Because
tell me a little bit about what happened for you, Margot. So how did it affect your life? You said you talked about tiredness and feeling a bit more moody, but how did that actually play out? Give me some examples of how that changed things for you.
Well, I wasn't sleeping that well, and I had a thyroid issue that came up as well, which is a really useful thing for women to go and have checked, because it's really common at that stage of life, and that can bring about all those symptoms I just described. But basically, it just made life really hard. Like some days I'd barely slept, and then I'd have to get up and teach a strong physical yoga class. So I really started to feel a bit demotivated, lost and confused. And when I spoke to some of my students about it, they said, yeah, that's quite normal. They seem to think that was what happened at that stage of life. It's almost like I lost my mojo, and it was like I was slouching off a skin. This was the skin I'd been in when I was a bleeding woman, and it was starting to shed, and there were bits shredding off, and I didn't really know where I was going. All I knew was that things were changing, and that either I could fight it, which just made it worse, particularly with the hot flushes, or I could surrender to it and actually look at and see this as an opportunity to change, because that's what seemed to be calling.
Well, that's really interesting. Let's just touch on that for a second. So you just said that you could fight it or you could surrender. So let's touch on those 2 issues. What do you mean by fighting it? And then what do you mean by surrendering?
Okay, I think there's a lot of rhetoric and narrative and chat around staying young, and that aging is not perceived as something respectable and revered and honoured in our society, the way perhaps it was in ancient societies or more traditional Indigenous societies, where women had a real role and were often the leaders in the community who were leading, changes and decisions made about the community. And I think that's kind of gone, and we glorify youth. So we struggle. We don't want to get older because we're bombarded with, oh no, you should be young, particularly with women. And so I think we resisted a little bit. Like we don't welcome the wrinkles, or the slightly wrinkly skin on the elbows and the sagging, and we're like, oh no, I'm getting old. But it's a beautiful thing, and it's a pressure thing, and not everyone gets there. So I think that's what I meant by resisting. So you're trying to, like, do more exercise and eat less. They don't work. Don't do it. You want to eat 3 balanced meals a day, and you actually want to work smarter with your exercise. Don't think, thrashing yourself at the gym will work. It'll just push up your cortisol levels. So you need to actually surrender to the process. And when you surrender to it, that gives you permission to rest, to finally just go, okay, I don't have to keep pushing. I don't have to keep doing. I can actually be the yoga that I've been practicing for a long time. I can just be with the changes. And I think when you surrender, it turns the journey inwards, and you stop focusing on the external and the sensory input that's coming in about how I should or could be feeling at this stage of my life, but I actually start to focus in on my heart when I surrender and what it is that I want to do with the rest of my life. So when I hit 55, it's like, oh, I've only got 15 years and I'm going to be 70. It's like, what do I want to do? I don't have the rest of my life stretching out on me. It's kind of behind me now. And so it became very poignant, and it was through surrendering and resting and just giving myself a little bit of space. It's not like I closed the studio down. I did eventually, but it's just like taking the afternoon off and just giving yourself some time to be with the change. Yeah.
I went to one of your workshops, Menopause for Women. I think it was a couple of years ago now. And one of the things that really struck me, well, actually quite a number of things struck me during that workshop, but one of the things that really struck me is that with when you're menstruating, there's a cycle, right? Everyone talks about the 28-day cycle. If you rest during the first 7 days, you generally have a better month. Then, this happens during this period, and this happens, and then this happens. We don't need to go through the whole thing, but the point I'm trying to make is that with menopause, there's no cycle. It's just all the time. So talk to us about, how do you manage? It's kind of like when you know that your cycle's coming and you go, oh, I'm feeling a little bit grumpy, it's time to rest. But how do you manage it when it's all the time?
Okay, so before I got into perimenopause, I talked a lot with my women in my retreats and so forth about the moon cycle, like you've just mentioned, the dark moon being symbolic, not necessarily when you bleed, but symbolically the bleeding, and then the full moon being ovulation. So once your period starts to get erratic through perimenopause, you can still locate yourself using the lunar cycle so that you still allow yourself to have some rest time. And you can kind of plan yourself around the moon cycle is one way to approach it. And I found that quite useful for a lot of women because when the moon is coming up, the water tables are shifting as well. And there is actually a shift in your energy. But when the water tables start to drop, we also drop as well as humans. It's part of our natural cycle. And women are really tuned into that natural cycle because we've had about 500 periods by the time we hit perimenopause. We've had quite a bit.
What, 500? Yeah. It's a lot of, yeah, okay.
Yeah. And so
number to it, but then I think, oh, gee, that's a lot.
Unless you had lots of children and you had gaps in between. But yeah, that's the sort of general number. So you've had lots of practice at this cycling. And so you can sort of hook into that natural cycle to help guide and navigate yourself. It's not going to replace the regularity. And as you said, some women are really relieved that it's going. And other women are also really sad. Like they really enjoyed their menstrual cycle. They really enjoyed having children, feeling fertile. And there's a real grief and sadness around that stage as well. So it's a tricky landscape, if you like, that time of life.
Very different for everyone, isn't it?
It is really different.
Wouldn't it be much nicer if we just got an email from nature every month saying that, hey, guess what? You're not pregnant. I'd much prefer that than having my period. Anyway, so let's talk about our partners. So it's not just us going through perimenopause and menopause, right? We're going to now bring the men part into this. Well, or, whoever your partner is. But I'm going to assume, in my case, it's a man, and I think in your case it was too. All right, so the partners in our lives.
Okay,
they must be really confused because I think at best men would have a very scanned overview of what menstrual cycles are, how they feel, how they affect your moods, and and everything. So now we're going to, like, put on some more pressure and say, guess what? Now we're going through perimenopause and menopause. What are the guys? How are the guys dealing with this?
Okay, I'll talk first to the cisgender or the heterosexual. With same-sex partners, there's not a lot of research around that. So the only information I have from that is my girlfriends, who I have girlfriends as partners. But when it comes to partners in general, or they don't want a lot of information, they really just want to know how they can support you. With men, men and women think differently. Men always want to fix. Yeah, they want to actually, I've got a problem, I'm feeling really this and this, I can't sleep, and they'll want to try to help you fix it, whatever that means for them. They come up with solutions. And what I've discovered in all the workshops and in my personal relationship with my partner is what women really want at this time is for someone just to shut up and listen. So we don't always want solutions. A lot of the time we just want to be heard and held. And the way that I did it in my relationship is, Mark, I just need you to listen. I don't need a solution. I don't need to be fixed. I just want you to sit here and listen to how I'm feeling. And then off I would go. And it would be, all over the place. The other thing that I think a lot of women have told me, and that I've also instigated when it was happening to me, is we need extra support. And it's not forever. It might just be for 3 years, 5 years. Extra support around the house, for example, like just, pulling a little more weight around the house, doing the housework, taking you out for a meal, just some extra support around that. And that can be really tricky in the workplace, but with your partner you should be able to have a reasonably open conversation about it without needing to go into the details, because they don't actually want to know what's hormonally happening. They just want to help you.
So that's interesting, the idea of fixing. So it's not something to be fixed. It's something that we just have to work together as either a family or a couple and just go, hey, look, and communicate openly, I think, and honestly. This is what's going on for me today. This is how you can support me. And I think it's as simple as having that sort of conversation, isn't it? They're not going to, guys aren't going to, or, partners aren't going to mind read what we need. I think we just, as females, we just have to be really open and clear and honest and say, this is what I need. Can you support me in this? And then I think just be okay with knowing that, men are going through their own stuff. They're very concerned about us, and they just do want to help. So their intentions are good, but they just need a bit of guidance on what we actually need.
That's right, Amrita. And you can be quite straightforward. Like for me, it was like, I have to go sleep in the spare room. I'm not sleeping well. I'm getting too hot. It's not that I don't love you, and it's not that I don't want to have intimacy with you. I'm just not getting a good night's sleep, and I need to go down there. And he very kindly said, I'll go down there. It's next to my office, and I'm there at 8 a.m. talking. I was like, why don't you stay in the other bedroom? And it's simple as just things like that. Like, we need to change the sheets. I got all beautiful linen sheets. Get the linen sheets, ladies, if you're hot at night. They really absorb the sweat. To just, doing little things and going to bed earlier. I started going to bed at 9, just really, saying I'm not going to go out, on the weekends. I don't need to socialize. You can go out with your mates, but I'm staying at home. Just really, like you said, being really clear in what you need and asking for it without apology.
Tell us about the 4 pillars, and then just give us a brief description about what people need to know. What are the key points in each of the pillars?
Okay, so the first one is sleep. It's really key to get a good night's sleep as you're going through menopause, but it can be the thing that's really elusive for a lot of women. And even 20-25% of women in post-menopause will still be struggling with their sleep. So it's about having about a sleep routine. This is not rocket science. About having a sleep routine, actually going to bed early, like 9 o'clock. So that you've got a window of time in which to sleep. You've got an opportunity. So even if you toss and turn, it's still going to be more restful than if you're up doing things. Setting your circadian rhythm, or setting it by getting up and activating the pineal gland. So actually getting out of bed in the morning, even if you've had an awful night's sleep, getting up and seeing the light is really supportive. Watching your stress levels, like I've already said, over exercising, that's pushing up the cortisol, which will interfere with sleep because our melatonin levels go down at menopause. So it's really, from an Ayurvedic perspective, I see it on a daily routine, almost like by 2 o'clock, I'm starting to think about winding down. So that's how much time I need to wind down to get to bed. So that may not be switching off devices, but by 4 o'clock, I've pretty much switched off all my devices. So it's making adjustments in your life to make sure that you have as much opportunity to get the best sleep possible, and then making your sleep environment as sleep friendly as you can. So you don't watch TV in there, you don't have your phone going on in there. It's dark and it's cool, and you've got cotton sheets or linen sheets. And if you do have a hot flush at night, then get up and have a cool shower and go back to bed. Bring your body temperature down, or with a slightly warm, cool shower. So sleep's really important. It helps your brain and it helps your muscles repair. And it also impacts your digestion if you're not getting a good night's sleep. So that's pillar number one. That would definitely be my number one. The next three, it would depend on the individual woman, which one would be the most important. So if you already eat a well-balanced diet, then nutrition might not be the next one you want to look at. If you're not clear about whether you're getting what you need to eat, then one simple way is to go to your doctor and get a set of tests done. So there's no point in adding supplements into your diet if you're not actually deficient. So if you're eating a good wholesome diet and you're getting a lot of whole foods, and you should be getting everything you need. But things like iron, checking your vitamin D levels, maybe even checking liver function, your fasting insulin for the insulin resistance, and then making those changes along the information that you've got from your doctor. So seeing a nutritionist. So 3 meals a day, make sure you've got protein on the plate, lots of fresh fruit and vegetables, a little bit of whole grain. So don't just ditch the carbs, and healthy fats. So avocado, olive oil, salmon, oily fish, etc. Number 2, well, let's call it number 3, is movement. So it's movement that allows you to get a good night's sleep. So that's going to be different for everyone. So you want to move on a regular basis, daily if you can. I like to do about half an hour to an hour of exercise, but I'm probably a bit of an exercise freak. Muscle building, resistance training is the way to go over doing things like really hardcore spin classes, etc. So 15 minutes of muscle building, maybe a daily walk would be enough, depending on how much time you've got. And again, you need to fit it into your timetable. But exercise and movement helps reduce stress, and also just allows you to process what's going on, because it's a little bit of me time. Often if you go to a yoga class, it's a whole hour of me just processing emotions and so forth. And the last one, of course, is stress reduction. So we all reduce stress in different ways. And a lot of what's going on with stress is actually the way that we perceive the world. It's not actually the world stressing us out. It's our perception of what's going on. And that can be quite intense and are really, really varied, because every woman will have a different story. A lot of trauma can resurface through perimenopause. All the things that you actually need to clear out and clean out and maybe have pushed under the carpet may just pop up, and things that didn't used to stress you will suddenly start, suddenly you'll be stressed about things you'd never even ever worried about before. So I guess the clue there, or cue for me, would be to simplify, to make your life as simple as possible, and put all the supports in place. Like if you can afford a cleaner, get a cleaner. Do you know what I mean? Change out, have a conversation with your work boss that you are not sleeping well through the night at the moment, and it won't go on forever, but at the moment you're working on it. But can you have a bit more flexibility or something, so that you're not stressed in your workplace? And that's that opening up the conversation, Amrita, and breaking that taboo. So those are the 4 pillars. Get a good night's sleep, do everything you can to do it. Nutrition, whole foods, really good whole food diets, 3 meals a day, include protein, but make sure you've got fiber and healthy fats in it as well. Best drink is water. Movement, something that agrees with you, that doesn't push up your cortisol levels, that makes you feel good and you want to do it. You want to do it, so you go and do it. And reducing stress. So that's actually simplifying your life. So there's as little that you've actually got time to rest and recuperate and bring yourself back from that stress response.
Margot, you've said before, we're putting on a little bit of weight, right? And there's always confusion as to whether, weight gain is a too much food, not enough movement thing. What's your take on it at this stage of life?
Look, it can definitely be too much food and not enough movement. That is a recipe for putting on weight. But for what's happening for a lot of women around menopause is become more insulin sensitive, which means the cells in our body, when the glucose comes along in the bloodstream, we need insulin. It's like a key, and it unlocks the cell, and the glucose goes in and gets converted to energy. And what happens is the cell gets sensitive, and so that the key doesn't work, the insulin doesn't work anymore. And that means the sugar floats around, and then it's put in, the body stores it. So we start to get fat around the center. So the simplest way to approach that is go and see a nutritionist, and it's a low glycemic diet, or looking at the sorts of foods you eat. So basmati rice, for example, has a low glycemic index, whereas white rice is quite high. So it's just looking at changing out a few things, but you'd need to see a nutritionist to help you do that. And in terms of movement and talking about if you overdo your exercise, if you think, I'm just going to work out even harder, what can happen is that it pushes up your cortisol levels because you're actually stressing your body. And the body's going through a mammoth change at menopause because there are estrogen receptors throughout your body. So everything's being affected as those hormones start to fluctuate. And it's actually driving your body into sympathetic. And once we've been through the change, our body actually is more inclined to be in the sympathetic. So we need to rethink our exercise. So rather than harder and faster and more intense is better, a doctor who's been studying women's brains and what sort of exercise is best for our brains at that stage of life, Dr. Lisa Mosconi, talks about mild to moderate. So it's about getting smart about how you exercise, like going for a morning walk and lifting weights for 10 to 15 minutes rather than going to the gym and spending hours slogging or working out, and a gentle yoga practice more so than a dynamic practice would be a nice combination.
Yeah, okay. Let's talk a little bit about GI foods, low GI foods, so low glycemic index, which these are foods that don't spike your sugar level. They keep it relatively stable. Yeah. Okay. Right. So with these foods, it's not about not having your favorite food anymore, but it's just swapping out one type of food for a similar type of food that doesn't have the same effect. So if we're talking about rice, white rice would be like a high GI food, whereas basmati or wild rice would be a low GI food, yeah? Have you got some more examples of some common foods that, we like to eat? Because changing food is really difficult. We know what we like, but changing the type of food is probably easier than cutting something out altogether. So, yeah,
sure. So you can actually go online, you can Google it and get a whole chart of the foods, and that's a really simple way for you to actually fine-tune your own eating habits. And I just wanted to circle back to that idea. Yeah, it doesn't mean not having a piece of cake. You've just got to do it without strings attached. It doesn't mean you have to go to the gym and work it off. Of course, you can still have your piece of cake. But cake is a high glycemic food, whereas a whole grain food, maybe like whole grain bread or oats, is a low glycemic. And then you can start to look at fruit in the same way. So oranges are low. Dates, which are often put in as natural sweeteners, very high. I had no idea, and I was eating all these vegan desserts, very high glycemic, which pushes up your blood sugar levels. Pumpkin, low glycemic. Potatoes, high. Most processed foods like cakes, biscuits, ice cream, all the goodies are up in the high. And so what you're looking at in the low glycemic is whole grains, lentils, pulses, beans, fresh fruit and vegetables. Yeah. And then you supplement that with your protein, whether it's fish or chicken or tofu, if you're vegetarian or vegan, or eggs, whatever it is that you like to eat.
So if you're looking for more information on what foods are low GI, the sort of websites that you'd want to look at is, maybe the Diabetes Foundation. They often, educate people on low glycemic diets. And also the Glycemic Index Foundation. They have a website that has all that sort of information on it too. So, yeah, we'll defer over there if you want more information on low GI foods and how it all works. Let's talk a bit about, we talked a bit about cortisol. So this is interesting as well. So and I think people know this, but maybe we just need to bring it back to the forefront. So when we exercise, we put our bodies under a certain amount of stress, and usually that's good, okay, because we want the body to, build muscle. We want the body to, build bone density. We want, we want some movement through all our systems, yeah? But when the body's already under load, so we're going through some major physical changes and the body's already under load, it may not be as supportive as we think to then go out and, do maybe a 5K run or something like that every day of the week. Some people it may be. But so what sort of exercise are we now sort of looking, or what sort of movement are we now sort of leaning towards that's going to be supportive as opposed to raising our cortisol levels?
Look, again, every woman's going to be different. So the key really is if you're sleeping through the night and you don't have achy muscles and joints, and whatever exercise you're doing is appropriate for you. But if those things are happening to you, not sleeping through the night, that's usually triggered by high cortisol levels. Also, if you've got achy joints and muscles, then you might want to swap out what you're doing. So what I've discovered for most women, it's walking is a fabulous exercise. Everyone can do it. You set your own pace. You can go quite power walk if that doesn't upset your sleep or make your muscles sore or achy. Or you can go for a gentle walk, because so inflammation is quite increases through perimenopause and menopause. Yoga is a beautiful exercise because it stretches, it lowers your heart rate, it works on calming the nervous system, which can get a little bit revved up with all the changes going on. For some women who are having achy muscles and joints, or maybe they've got menopause-related arthritis, swimming is fantastic because it will build up the muscles and support the joints, but it doesn't put any weight bearing through the bones. Which is really helpful, though of course building muscle is how you build bones. So it's really about finding the sort of exercise that's right for you. So for example, my girlfriend took up dancing. She does quite vigorous dancing. She sleeps through the night. It's moving her body, and she also lifts weights, which is what I would recommend. Lifting weights doesn't have to be something heavy that you go to the gym and go, ooh. It can just be something that you do small at home, and there's heaps of stuff on YouTube to show you how to do it. And the reason I'm saying lift weights is for a couple of reasons. It actually pulls glucose out of the bloodstream, resistance training, so that helps with that insulin resistance we were talking about. And it's also a really great way to build up your muscles, and that can often help with you sleeping through the night when you've exercised but not over exercise. So it's quite a short targeted exercise routine. I do a little bit of high intensity, like maybe 10-15 minutes, and that works really well for me. And again, I monitor how I'm feeling, and that's how I adjust my exercise. So you may find if you're an avid exerciser, you may need to pull it back in. And there was actually, I can tell you a story. There was a woman on one of my Embrace Menopause online program, and her day was to get up at 6 a.m, drink a double black coffee and go for a power walk, and then do CrossFit training, and then go to work from 9:30 to 6:30, come home, go for another walk, and then eat the one meal of the day. And when I asked her, do you feel stressed? She's like, no, I don't feel stressed at all. But she was actually stressing her body, and she wouldn't sleep because she was getting hot flushes and through the night. And that's because she was doing too much exercise without any food to support it. But she was pushing herself because she wanted to stay strong. The thing is, Amrita, is you can put muscle on until you die. That's what the research shows. So that 99-year-old geriatrics and put on muscle. So if you are a keen exerciser and you can feel your physical fitness dropping away, it will return. And maybe just going a little bit more gently, a little bit more easy on yourself through this transition, just to support getting a good night's sleep, because that makes a huge difference.
I think that we need to give people, women and men, a bit of hope that this is a period that will pass. It's going to be somewhat uncomfortable. There's going to be a lot of change required But, it will pass. So let's talk now a little bit about life after perimenopause.
What happens with the shift in estrogen in particular is we've got 4 different types. And the one that we have when we're in our reproductive phase is estradiol. And it's a hormone that really helps us want to keep the peace, bite our tongue, and keep the tribe together. It's quite primal in its essence. But when that swaps out to estradiol, when we move into early menopause, the sort of the veil is lifted, and suddenly it's like, actually, I don't want to to everybody else anymore. I'm going to put myself first. So there's a real shift in the way that we see our roles, our responsibilities in our lives, in our work. And that's what I notice. It's almost like a revolution coming from within, and the capacity to say no suddenly becomes super easy. And you're like, wow, why was I saying yes when, like, as in my 30s, I say yes to everything? It's like, and I'm just noticing this through and through. There's a real sort of coming home to yourself, a sense of standing in your own power as who you are as a woman, and everything you've had up until that point has got you to where you are, and you just don't take any more BS anymore. It's really quite remarkable once you get to the other side. And that's really part of the message I want to give women, is do not think that it's over, that you're over the hill. That's rubbish. There's a whole new horizon opening up, and it's like, what do you want to do with it? It's an opportunity, and it's a celebration, because you will feel different, quite different. You've been rewired.
And Margot, I see you as quite an inspiration. So Margot has actually put together a yoga course that supports women going through perimenopause and menopause. Margot, do you want to tell us a little bit about your offerings?
Yeah, sure. Look, I've been running workshops for a long time, and I noticed that at my retreats, they were often women 40 plus. So I started tailoring them. So I run masterclasses for women just to get out across general information. And from the online program I ran through the pandemic, I decided there's a real hole in the yoga world where we learn about pregnancy and we learn about, some other small things, but we don't really talk about menopause. And yet women are living longer, and there's a huge amount of time, and it's a huge group of women who start practicing yoga often at that stage of life, or are already practicing. So I put together a 40-hour program for teachers. And it covers, it's quite holistic. It covers the Ayurvedic perspective of menopause. We look at TCM as well, and I've divided it into 4 focus areas, so that by the time you come out of the program, you know what sort of yoga practices, say asana, pranayama, meditation, would be appropriate. For example, if you were suffering from hot flushes, or if you were having anxiety, because anxiety can often become amplified through menopause and beyond. Or what would we do if we were feeling really low in mood and quite depressed? Because again, depression can come to the fore for women through perimenopause and beyond. And so that's what I'm doing at the moment. I'm just sort of teaching teachers and doing workshops for women. I find there's a real richness in gathering. So when you gather with a circle of women, part of the training I do is I teach the teachers how to run a women's circle, so that women actually can talk about their experience but feel held and safe, and know that what they're saying is private and confidential. And that's probably the most precious part of the workshops. The feedback I get is like, it was so wonderful to hear other women's experience, and to hear that I'm not going bonkers, that other women are going through this. I will get through it. I'm not going crazy. Just that sort of feedback from, it was sensational. So that's why I keep doing it.
So, Margot, it's obviously really important that women understand what's happening in their own bodies, because this is going to affect not only our physical state, it'll affect our mental state. And, again, both of those is going to affect all the people around us, our family, our workmates, our community. So it's really important for us to know what's going on with us. Talk to me a little bit about that.
I think education is super important. A lot of women think that perimenopause starts in their 50s. I did. It doesn't. It can start as early as 35, 38. And the more information we know about the changes in the body gives us our power back. It's about women's empowerment. In a way, it's a health issue. It's like, a women's rights issue, because the more info you have, you can then go out and look at what sort of supports would fit with you. Let me give you an example. The heart changes at menopause. Your cholesterol levels go up. That's because estrogen suppresses them. And there's changes in the arteries. We're just not as flexible, so the blood's not flowing through as much. 1 in 2 women die of heart disease or get cardiovascular disease, and it's starting to happen in their 40s, because that's when the menopause starts to happen, and when the changes in estrogen and progesterone are happening. Now, if we had that information, say at our late 30s or early 40s, we might choose to change some of our practices, some of our lifestyle, maybe get more physical exercise or change the foods that we're eating. It's a real case of ownership of your health and feeling strong enough to go in and get the information and then follow through and go to the doctor. And if the first doctor you go to says, oh, no, you're a silly old woman, go to another doctor. You just don't. Yeah, it really is about informing yourself and knowing.
Margot, this is interesting because you said at about age 30, right? This is not something that I personally didn't think of until I was hitting 40, 45. So if I was going to make, changes and set up supports, I'm kind of a decade too late. Well, not too late, but, it's something that I should have been thinking about earlier. But because we don't talk about it, it's not a thing. I wouldn't even have the slightest idea as to where to go and get support for this or to start thinking about this. It's just not on the radar.
No, of course it's not on the radar. And why would it be? Because we perceive menopause as something that's horrible and it's all hot flushes and angry women and then you're old. And that's kind of the message. That was the trajectory that I sort of had in my head. It's like, oh, I don't want to do that. And look, for maybe late 30s more than 30, but in your late 30s, things are certainly changing. And if you have something like premature ovarian insufficiency or you've had cancer, for example, and you're thrust into menopause early, when we're not getting the information, and it's not like you have to have it at a deep scientific level. We just need the basics, what is changing in my heart, because that's a really big one for me. Like, I have my family history of cardiovascular disease, so I want to know. Like you, it's probably too late. I should have known a decade earlier, but that's okay, because I can still do things right now. I don't have to get bogged down and it's too late. It's not. You can always make changes and things will be better because you have, and they don't have to be huge changes, small changes.
Where do we go to find this information out, get support? What can you recommend?
That's a really good question. And that's kind of why I'm doing what I'm doing, because there isn't a place that you can go. You can go and look at the Australian Menopause Society, which is an online site, which is run by doctors, but it's not affiliated with the pharmaceutical companies or the medical industry. It's just run by doctors with information about the different changes and things like HRT, etc. You could try nutritional support, like go and see a nutritionist and specifically say that you're going through perimenopause and can you have some support there. Joining a group or developing or having your own women's circle is also a wonderful way. But I'd like to see more of these kind of hubs, and I don't think we have them as such, particularly out here in the regions. It's quite difficult. That's why I run the workshops where I go and I provide an hour of information with nutrition, and then we do a yoga practice and then a sharing circle. So the reason I put my training together is because the information's all over the place.
Do we need to give permission for women to talk about perimenopause and menopause? So we need to move this out of the taboo, out of the taboo bin and say, hey, it's okay to talk about this. Let's start empowering ourselves and let's start, hey, what was your experience and, where can you get support and, all that sort of stuff. How do we move this out of the taboo column?
I talked about it in my yoga classes. I'd be saying, I'm having a hot flush. And I would alter my practice to do that. And then I would talk about, that it's a natural part of life. It's the seasonal cycle again. And I would try to talk about it with whoever. I probably bombarded a lot of people, and all the women who are coming through my trainings and the women who've been at my workshops are pretty open, and they're all out there talking about it as well. So I think the conversation is starting to shift and starting to change. There's a lot of podcasts that you can listen to that are fabulous.
Margot, I've started to notice that when I go out to, I don't know, pubs or different groups or trainings or whatever, that there's a pretty big age gap between me and some of the other participants. And I don't want to say that I'm feeling old, but you know what? I'm going to approach this stage of my life really gracefully. I mean, I don't know if you can see, but there's like a few grey hairs growing up there, and you know, a few more wrinkles on the hands and the face these days. But you know what? This is me, and I'm going to be proud of it, and I'm going to be graceful. So have you got any tips on how to live your life, how to age gracefully? Sorry, how to age gracefully.
I think you hit the nail on the head, is that being comfortable with who you are at this stage of life. And one of my friends says that she's going to age disgracefully. So she sees it as an opportunity to have more fun and adventures, and to actually not to even worry about that there's young and there's old, because at the end of the day, we're all humans, and we all just want to be happy. And I think it's breaking down in your own mind that idea that you're getting older, because all of us are aging every second of the day. There's a wonderful traditional Native American saying that says, at her first bleeding, a woman meets her power, and during her bleeding years, she practices it. And when at menopause, she becomes it. So I think we're actually standing in our power. And what I've discovered on trainings, being the older woman, is a lot of the younger women have actually come in and talk to you for your wisdom, that they actually want to hear what you've got to offer, and to learn from you, and to understand, or to see, perhaps to be modeled to, that this stage of our life is not my life's over. I've got a whole new chapter happening, and that's a positive narrative for them to see actually unfolding in front of them when they do see older people.
And that's really awesome to hear, because my personal experience has been, you know, I used to ring my grandmother up, hey, Nan, how you doing? Oh, my knee hurts and my tailbone hurts and my pinky finger hurts. And, you know, and I'm just like, oh, this is not something to look forward to. And then, you know, even the family sort of conversation around that was, you know, go and see your grandmother. It's like, oh, I don't really want to, because it's hard work. And then she makes me do all this stuff for her because she just refuses to, you know, claim her independence. And, you know, it was always really negative. So having a positive spin on that, let's reframe this. So let's reframe this about aging, and that, you know, old people are not something that we just dispense of and throw into a nursing home because we don't want to deal with them anymore. Let's reframe the conversation here, Margot.
That sounds like a great idea. And I think when you meet women, like I had a woman when I was growing up called Mrs. Dumphy, and she was just always exuberant, and everything was fabulous and wonderful, and everything was a big adventure. And even in her 70s, she was like that. Whereas my mother tended to awfulize things, and it was always, everything was terrible, and oh, my knee hurts and this hurts. And it's like, we've got a choice. We have a choice in the way that we present ourselves to the world, and we've got a choice with the conversation that we're having with ourselves about our natural trajectory through life. There's no escaping dying. So we've got choices about how we want to get there. And sure, we may feel our bodies aching a little bit more, but there's always something that you can almost distract the mind with. There's a beautiful sunset, or a leaf falling down, or going out with a friend and having a good belly laugh, even if it is about getting older, because it can be pretty funny. And I do think that conversation is happening. So one of my friends just disappeared to India for 2 years. Your long-term relationship broke up. She's like, stuff it, I'm 50 something. And she just went away. And had adventures, and everyone's going, I'm so jealous. It's like, but you could do that too, because we have the choice. We can make that choice about the conversation we're having with ourselves and what we want to do. And life is precious. You realize there's only so much time left, and you've got to squeeze the juice out of it. You've got to wake up each day and say, vitamin J. Yep, vitamin joy. Vitamin joy.
Vitamin joy.
Yeah,
Is that coming in a capsule or what?
no, you've got to find it yourself.
Oh, okay, got it.
It's about surrounding yourself with people who make you laugh, who have fun and adventures, who, don't worry about the shapes of their bodies. We've all got a body, they come in so many different shapes and sizes. It doesn't matter. Having adventures and doing new things, learning to play the guitar, getting a puppy at 57. What was I thinking? But, just bringing more joy into your life. You're in charge of that. No one can do that for you. You're in charge of it. And I think that's what this time of life is all about, transforming.
So, Margot, what I think we'll do for people watching our interview today is that we'll put some resources down in the comments below. So, Margot will send me some of her favourite books, podcasts, some really great websites, so that there's enough information for you to get started on your journey about learning about perimenopause and menopause, and obviously talking about the 4 pillars, things about sleep, nutrition, movement. What did I miss there?
Stress reduction.
That's it. But people will have some online resources to go to. And yeah, hey, start up the conversation. Start up the conversation with your friends and with your family members about perimenopause and menopause. Get it out there. Let's stop it from being a taboo subject and start making this normal. Aging is okay. Aging is normal. Yes, we're going to get grey hair. Yes, we're going to get wrinkles. Yes, things are going to change. And let's be okay with that instead of making it something that, is either fearful or something that, we're not looking forward to, or something that makes us lesser people. We're not. Okay. It's just a natural part of our life cycle. We're all going to go through it. So let's embrace it and love it.
Yeah, beautiful. That's exactly my message. Educate yourself. Become empowered with the education that you've got. Inform yourself. Tell your sisters, your aunties, your mothers, everyone, as much as possible, talk about what's going on. Aging is just what happens. Everything does it. And really, it's not even aging, it's change. It's just change and being able to flow with those changes as we get older. And do new things. Keep doing new things, because your body and brain will love it. And that's the best way to stay fit and healthy. It's not about, running marathons. We can do that, of course, if you want to. It's about doing things that light you up.
And Margaret was telling me before off camera that one of the exercises that she does in her workshops is that she encourages participants to write a letter to themselves. So tell me a little bit about this letter and how it works, Margot.
Of course, thank you very much. I forgot about that. So I asked participants to imagine that they're 80 and they're sitting on the veranda and they're writing a letter to themselves, and it's about what they would have liked to have done in their life. So it's a really good reflection piece, because then you think about what's really important to you, and whether when you get to 80, you would have done that and said, wow, I've had a wonderful life. So it's a really helpful exercise. So for me, for example, I went out and I got a puppy. My girlfriend took up tango dancing. She'd always wanted to tango dance. And it's like, my friend, the one that went to India, playing the guitar. It's like, just, it's going to end at some point. And it's like, so what do you want to do in this window of time? There's so many opportunities out there, so many exciting things that you can do. Don't sit around waiting for it to come to you. Go out there and explore it. And it's, live
no regrets, have a great, fulfilling life, and and that's just it, isn't it? Isn't that why we're here? We're here to have experiences. And I think if we lock ourselves away in a room and are too afraid to try new things and to meet new people and to take a risk and put ourselves out there, then we're not engaging, and we're not getting that fullness that life has to offer us. But it really does depend on us, getting out the door and doing something.
Exactly. Don't focus on what you can't do. Focus on what you can do. My mother went to Uzbekistan at 76. It's like, you can do these things. Go do them. What is that thing that you really want to do? Do you want to walk the Camino? Do you want to knit an incredibly long scarf? It doesn't have to be something dramatic. What is it that you want to do? Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I love it. I love it. Well, I'm certainly inspired to go out and do something new. So, Margot, thank you very much for your time today. Your wisdom that you've imparted on us, I just honestly believe that anybody watching this, whether they're male or female, is going to be so much more empowered and educated about perimenopause and menopause. And if you want more, then join one of Margot's workshops. I can only imagine if she's given us this much information in such a short interview that how much you'd really benefit from, attending a workshop. So thanks, Margot.
Thank you so much for inviting me, Amrita. I really pack it in. It's like I squeeze in as much as I can into a workshop. I just wanted to say thank you for inviting me on your Breaking Boxes show. It's a great initiative, and I really look forward to seeing what else pops up on your podcast.
Perfect. Okay, thanks, Margot.
Going in